This is the Nation's Conspire channel. Welcome to today's show. If you haven't heard, the Girl Scouts of America are being sued for putting heavy metals and dangerous chemicals in their Girl Scout cookies. Now, the headline you see on the screen says, lawsuit claims Girl Scout cookies contain heavy metals, but mom says she's still buying it. And that just sums up the world that we're living in. You can tell these people that they're about to eat something that's filled with toxic chemicals like aluminum, like mercury, like lead, like glyphosate, and they say, hey, you know what? I'm going to eat it anyway, right? And of course, we know these are the same people, pretty much, who had no problem with poisoning themselves a few years ago. They didn't need any tests to be done. All they needed was for Big Brother to tell them that it was safe, so they should go and do it. And in this case, they're telling you that it's not safe, and they still don't care. They're still willing to eat the toxic chemicals. So I'm going to play for you a news clip here so you can get a better understanding of what's going on. But according to a study that was conducted by Moms Across America, they tested these Girl Scout cookies, and 88% of the samples tested positive for 5 toxic metals, as well as glyphosate, which is a herbicide linked to health concerns. And of course, we know they shove glyphosate in pretty much every single thing that you'll find at a grocery store. It makes one actually wonder, is the FDA's job to protect us from toxic chemicals and diseases like cancer, or is their job to just poison us? Well, I think we already know the answer to that question. And the 5 chemicals that the cookies tested positive for were aluminum, arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury, along with glyphosate. So here's a news clip, and here's the state of the world, where you can be told flat out that these things are filled with metals, and moms will say, whatever, I'll still buy it and give it to my kid. You even get a nutritionist, Edward Jones, who of course tries to make it sound like it's normal for metals to be in our food because heavy metals are found in most parts of the earth. So I guess that means that we should just start eating it, right? I mean, what's next? Are they going to tell us to go to a metal factory? Should we start eating our coins, since I know they want to get change out of circulation? Should we start eating quarters and nickels too in the future? I mean, sure, makes perfect sense. Here's the news clip.
America is being sued after a study claimed their famous cookies could be harmful to your health. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Kim Chapman-Whitfield. Now, this study cited in the lawsuit that it claims the cookies contain a widely used herbicide and other heavy metals. The study only sampled 25 cookies, and there are no claims of any illness from eating the cookies. The suit asked for $5 million in damages. Fox Chattanooga's Ja'Kai Spikes spoke with local Chattanooga nutritionists as well as a mom to see their reactions to the suit.
The consumer group Moms Across America is now suing Girl Scouts of America for their cookies allegedly containing heavy metals and glyphosate. Girl Scouts of America did say that their cookies are safe, but we did make sure to get an opinion of a mother in our community. Shawana Jennings says she has concerns about the food she gives her family.
We don't know if they're putting things in organic foods. You just never know these days.
Edward Jones, owner of Nutrition World in Chattanooga, believes that heavy metals in food are more common than some may think.
Heavy metals are found on most parts of the earth, so if a food is grown on it, I don't care if it's rice or if Girl Scout cookies are finding ingredients, you have a chance of heavy metals.
Even though Jones says that we can't escape ingesting heavy metals in our food, there's ways that you can prevent damage to your body. For example, vitamin C and antioxidants.
Sweating in a sauna, that's one way to get rid of some of these heavy metals.
Jones says some herbicides like glyphosate can have benefits, but there are some risks.
Glyphosate was approved as an antibiotic in 2010, but it's also, of course, used on foods to help to decrease the kind of pests that they want to do. But in the meantime, that damages our gut lining, and it causes many problems like leaky gut.
According to Forbes, the research cited in the lawsuit against the Girl Scouts was not peer-reviewed or published in a scientific journal. On their website, the Girl Scouts say, quote, glyphosate is widely used in agriculture in accordance with established EPA standards, and it's found nearly everywhere in the food chain. Trace amounts of glyphosates can be found in fresh fruits, vegetables, cereals, baked goods, and other food and beverage. Now, as far as Jennings goes, would that make you stop shopping or stop eating Girl Scout cookies?
No.
From Chattanooga, I'm Jakai Spikes, Fox Chattanooga.
And on their website, the Girl Scouts of America added their cookies are, quote, made with ingredients that adhere to food safety standards set by the FDA and other relevant authorities.
So you could have these things right in front of your face. And really what this should start doing is it should make people start asking questions about what the FDA really does and how the FDA actually approves pesticides. Now, in the past, I get people who get angry when I talk about these things because they say, well, there has to be weed killer used in order to farm, in order to grow. So, of course, there's going to be traces of weed killer. They defend the same institutions that are trying to obviously poison their bodies, their temples, right? And people out there need to understand that this is not normal. People have been farming since the year zero, and it's only now that people are having their food stuffed with things like glyphosate and aluminum. And of course, let's not forget, we don't have to even worry about getting aluminum in our food because they're spraying it on us every day. Aluminum and barium, bale, right from the sky. So obviously we live in a world where they're putting metals in our water, they're putting metals in the air, and they're putting metals in processed food. So again, what you heard there was even a mother who's saying, hey, you know what? There's tough metals in a lot of these products. Doesn't mean I'm going to stop eating them, right? And then, of course, these articles that are out there now because of this lawsuit are trying to explain how heavy metals get into food. That's what the concern is from USA Today, from the New York Post, all these mainstream media outlets want to explain to the sheeple why there's metals in the food. So now that they're hearing about metals in their food and they're going, whoa, wait, what? I'm eating metals? Yeah, you're eating metals and you're getting soft metals sprayed on you every single day. And why do you think so many people have cancer and so many people are unable to have children and et cetera, et cetera? So many people now have Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, right? Well, because it's not natural for humans to eat heavy metals. But the USA Today wants to tell you how the metals get into your food so that you say, oh, I guess it's not really a big deal. Even though, again, people have been farming since the year zero and this has never been a thing. So at the advent of many food safety regulations and the FDA itself, tests for contaminants weren't as sensitive as they are today. When lawmakers passed laws like the 1950s era Food Additives Amendment that banned any amount of cancer-causing substances from food, testing for such substances may have only been in the parts per million range. Now scientists can test in parts per billion or trillion, revealing much tinier amounts in many more foods than previously known. When testing at such a sensitive level, contaminants can probably be found in many household food products. So that's a good enough excuse, right? I mean, if you're going to test at such a high level, of course you're going to find traces of heavy metal. Oh! It says there's several pathways that may lead heavy metals to the food we eat. Some are naturally occurring in the environment. Others trace back to the widespread use of pesticides in crops that contain heavy metals. While they're no longer used on food crops, they've long since contaminated soil, water, and even the air. Sometimes heavy metals get into food during their processing, right? And then they say, should you be worried about your food? Heavy metals are linked to a variety of acute and long-term illnesses and development issues. The FDA has set some recommended lead levels for babies and young children and is in the midst of developing similar levels for arsenic, cadmium, and mercury, but doesn't have suggested levels for the general population. It said the agency says its goal is to reduce the levels of contaminants such as arsenic, lead, cadmium, and mercury in food. And of course, from the statement from the Girl Scouts, they said heavy metals can occur naturally in soil. Girl Scout cookies are made with ingredients that adhere to food safety standards set by the FDA and other relevant authorities. Of course, that should lead to the question of what are the standards of the FDA? Because when it's found that weed killer is in products like your cereal, like Monsanto glyphosate found in breakfast foods, Isn't the job of the FDA to make sure that you're not getting the weed killer in the food that you're actually selling on shelves in grocery stores? Because this is the problem with the world we live in. Everybody's so trusting. You see the sign, it's a grocery store. You go there and you assume because of the FDA, because of your government, I mean, they couldn't be selling you something that's toxic, right? It's got a nice little logo. It's sitting in a box on the shelf. It's Cheerios, right? You remember all those cute commercials for Cheerios, getting up in the morning and having a good breakfast of glyphosate? And hey, why should you worry about it? Because everybody trusts in these institutions, right? They trust in the government. They trust in everything without even thinking twice about what they're putting inside of their body. So the Girl Scouts say, well, heavy metals can occur naturally in soil. And that's all it takes for a sheeple to dismiss the fact that there are heavy metals, there is weed killer, there is glyphosate, there is all sorts of things in processed foods that will kill you. And again, they try to explain how glyphosate ends up in the food. And another one of these articles, and they say farmers use glyphosate on non-organic or conventionally grown foods. It's used as a weed killer or to dry crops, allowing for an earlier harvest. Unfortunately, this means that glyphosate residue ends up directly in our food. This toxic chemical is sprayed on many common crops, such as corn, soy, beans, nuts, and grains like oats and wheat. Though glyphosate is found in many items we buy at the store, there are some foods that are more likely to contain the pesticide than others. So again, tell me what the purpose of the FDA is, other than to make sure that glyphosate is in our food. Now, for anybody out there that's going to say, well, there has to be pesticides because you can't farm without pesticides. Well, maybe you haven't heard of electroculture. For anybody out there that doesn't know about electroculture, this is another method that could be used in farming to double your yield, to help you grow food faster without needing glyphosate, because they just said in that specific article, they said, look, this allows for an earlier harvest so they can maximize their returns, right? But electroculture is an ancient practice that uses atmospheric energy to improve plant growth, soil fertility, and crop yields, naturally and without synthetic fertilizers or pesticides. So for those of you that don't know, electroculture is pretty much, this is like something, again, when we think about the secrets that the government hides, right? About free energy. We've all talked about that with Nikola Tesla and the discovery of free energy above us and how it could be obtained by everybody and everybody could have free energy. Well, those are things that they don't want you to know. Well, electroculture is very similar to that because and of course, there's people out there that'll say electroculture doesn't work, and I probably would just assume that they're not doing it correctly because there is a method to it. You don't just wrap copper around a pole. You have to wrap it at a certain degree. You have to point the copper north at a certain direction depending on where you're growing your crops. There's a method to it, but it's a simple method if you actually just allow yourself to learn about it. And there was articles out there 100 plus years ago that were talking about the aid of electricity and copper in order to grow food quicker, to double your yield, and to also not need pesticides or any types of chemicals on the food. But why would the government want you to know that? Why would the government want you to know that you could do it yourself at home, that there's free energy out there in the world that you could actually gain access to freely without needing anybody else's help? Right? You don't have to be dependent on the electric company. You wouldn't have to be dependent on Big Brother. You wouldn't have to worry about grid shutdowns. And of course, this is not something they want people out there to know because they want people who garden at home to also use pesticides and weed killer on their own food. Why? Well, because it'll kill you. This is what electroculture looks like for anybody out there that's not familiar.
And this copper goes down into the bottom of that planer. It goes west. Comes out, goes underground, goes into this one, underground, it goes through all of them. Then you bring it over here, and it's hooked up to the bottom of this aluminum pole, and they got a big zinc bolt in it, so it causes an electromagnetic field. You go around, and there's no bugs here, no bugs. That old route in 5 days, everything doubled in size. That one from here to there. This is spilling over. That grew about 1.5 feet in 5 days.
So why wouldn't farmers use this type of method? Do all farmers know about this method? Probably not. But I guarantee you a lot of them don't use this method because it's cheaper. You'd have to put these rods in every 15 feet because that's as far as one of those copper wires or copper poles will energize or electrify the soil below. So a large field would probably need many of these, and then how are they going to drive around these in their tractors? And I'm sure the government probably forbids these farmers from actually doing it in the first place. There's people out there that say that this type of thing doesn't work, but there's a lot of truth behind it because a lot of people such as myself have tried it before and seen that it does work and seen that you don't need pesticides when using this because the bugs stay away because there's an electromagnetic field, almost like an electric fence, so to speak, that a human wouldn't feel, but these insects feel, and it pushes them away from going on these crops or whatever you might be actually growing. So those are things they don't want you to know about. What they do want you to know is that everything's fine, that you could trust the FDA. Don't worry about heavy metals in your food just because some crazy mom is suing the Girl Scouts. And of course, we know the mom will likely lose the case because the Girl Scouts will be protected. But it's amazing that these articles out there tell you the facts about what's in these cookies. And it's more than this, okay? Run tests on the majority of cereals. Run tests on the majority of processed cookies, etc. And you will find the same exact things in it. And then when you wonder why so many people get sick so often, so many people suffer from anxiety and depression and panic attacks and have so many ailments, well, look no further than the food. And this is the food that the government approves and allows to be sold in stores. So while this is out there, of course, they have to spin. And they spin by saying, here's how they get into your food. So they explain to the sheeple how metals get into the food so that when you bring it up to them, they automatically say, it has to be in there. How else are they going to farm? As if 100 years ago or 200 years ago, farmers were dumping these chemicals in the food. They weren't dumping the chemicals in the food. And they say, should you be worried? And they say, of course not. Don't be worried, just smile. Smile while we kill you, right? Because that's pretty much what they're saying as they hold up a middle finger and smile at you. And again, we know how difficult the government makes it for people to farm on their own. And don't forget those community gardens that I've covered in the past where the government wants documentation of what you're farming in your yard, even if it's 10 by 10 foot little tomato garden that you have, right? Now, why would the government want to know that? Well, they want to know that because, of course, they're going to come and commandeer it when they decide to do the things that they have planned to all of us. So glyphosate, don't worry about it. Aluminum, don't worry about it. Arsenic, that's perfectly normal. Mercury, lead, cadmium, come on. Just go back about your day, folks. Everything's okay. Unbelievable. Girl Scout cookies, just another one that's been outed out in the open. But like the mom says, she's still going to buy it, right? Because sheeple is as sheeple does. What a scary time to be alive. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.